welcome everybody once again to a Safe Place podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure to be joined by the most specialist of special guests today, and that's Tim Freke, who's a philosopher, who's wrote 35 books, and he's talking a philosophy of trans-scientific spiritualism. So to help me out here, Tim, do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so it seems to me that we need a new form of spirituality to take us into the 21st century, that since the birth of science, spirituality has fallen behind. And science, I'm a huge fan of science, but it's missing something. And what it's missing is this other aspect of existence. But to bring it in, to bring that back in, we need spirituality to sharpen up. It needs to embrace science. It needs to become rational, and yet it still needs to offer these perennial truths that it's been exploring for, well, forever.
And it's an interesting idea that bringing the science into spirituality, something that's probably never been done before, has it?
Well, if you go back to the birth of science, it arose by being in opposition, well, eventually in being in opposition to religion. So it was a movement on in culture which was able to look at religion and go, look, this stuff is actually a mythic understanding. It's pre-rational. We can understand things better. And it has. And it's been a miracle. It's helped us understand the universe in ways our ancestors couldn't possibly imagine. And it's brought huge compassion into the world. That's often missed. You know, there's a lot in the old religious ideas which are really unkind. You know, if you've got the idea that if you have a child and it's deformed or there's some problem with somebody, it's a judgment from God. Just leave it out, let it die. You know, it's karma, it's punishment. Whereas science came in and went, no, we're not going to have that. We're going to solve these problems. And it has solved a lot of those problems. It's done amazingly. But it's become associated with a philosophy of materialism or reductionism, which goes, look, really all that reality is made up of is matter. So there's the body, which is organic matter, and it gives rise to the psyche, but that's kind of just a byproduct. That's all it is. And so spirituality is all nonsense. So things which I think are describing an aspect of reality are now treated in that world as unreal. And so we've lost something. So we've gained all this huge wealth of knowledge, but we've also lost something really important. So what I want to do is to, and it's not just me, is to create a new form of spirituality, which I call trans-scientific, because it transcends and includes science.
Yeah.
It's adding spirituality back into the picture.
So what would you say is the biggest quarrel that the two have? What is the biggest problem? Why can't we emerge them before now?
That's such a great question. So the biggest thing on one side is what I've already said. It's the reductionism.
Yeah.
So you've got these two opposing schools, actually, which I think are both wrong. And I think they both need to change in order to come together. So on the scientific side, you've got the idea I've said already. Everything reduces to the simplest thing, which is matter. Actually, materialism has been shown wrong for at least 100 years by science itself. Physics is no longer materialist. It's informational. So the whole idea that it's all made of matter has gone. But the reductionism has stayed. It's still, what's real is the lowest common denominator. And then in spirituality, you've got this idea that the world has not evolved, like science says, but has kind of fallen from some pure state. God's had a dream and we've become lost in the dream. The soul has fallen into matter. Plato says the body is a tomb. You get this kind of fall. So on the one hand, you've got this idea that it's all evolved, but really it's all the basic thing. On the other hand, you've got this idea we've fallen into something and become lost. What I think the solution is to take this incredible idea that science has come up with, that the whole universe has evolved. That's the biggest idea, arguably ever, I think. I mean, it's enormous. We've had it for 100 years now, and it seems to be true. But so we've got this idea of emergence, but to stop the reductionism, because emergentism, which is now becoming a dominant view in science, is the opposite of that, because it goes, no, you can't reduce life to matter, and you can't reduce psyche to biology, because the more emergent thing is more.
Yeah.
So, take something simple like, bring together on a very basic level, you bring together oxygen and hydrogen, you get water. Well, that's a completely new thing. You can't, it's more than the two gases. You've now got a liquid, for instance.
Yeah.
And that's the whole way through. So my message to science is it's not reductionist. And the psyche, the thing which you're exploring with this podcast, this non-physical experience we're all having of thoughts, and all images and dreams, this is not some sort of arbitrary byproduct of a piece of porridge in your head. This is a whole level of reality. And that's what spirituality has always been saying.
And when you talk about this, Tim, and you said moments ago that we lost something.
Yeah.
What is it that you think that we lost through this reductionistic philosophy of science?
We lost meaning.
Yeah.
We lost meaning because science has given us so much understanding of the early levels of evolution, so physics and then more recently biology. But then it stops, and obviously it goes into psychology, but it's in a reductionist way. But its ultimate message, I always think of this when I watch, those lovely programs you watch on TV when you've got some enthusiast, science, it shows you the wonders of the universe. And it does. But there's small print with that. And the small print is, but by the way, the universe is a vast, cold, meaningless void. You're here for long enough to go, what the hell's going on? And then you're dead. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've lost. So we're growing. So the whole of the culture, which in my own lifetime has become more and more dominated by that view, is becoming what I call a soul crisis. It's a crisis of meaning.
And I love the thing I saw in a previous episode that you released on your channel when you spoke about the idea, and you described yourself as a talking monk.
Yeah.
You said that here I am now making these noises, and in a sense, they have no meaning. It's you bring meaning. The psyche brings meaning into reality in a sense, doesn't it?
Well, this is why I think you can see very quickly, I hope, that the psyche, worth also saying, just to bring the science and spirituality together, the word psyche is just the Greek word for soul.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the psyche, we're just talking about what previous generations have talked about as the soul. And so the idea in spirituality is that you exist as a non-physical something is true right now in everyone's experience. Every single person right now is experiencing both the body and sensations and the world and the psyche or the soul, which is not in the world. Where is it? Where are we understanding the meaning of these thoughts? We're nowhere. It doesn't exist in the world, and the thoughts aren't made of matter. So can they be reduced? Is it just neurons? Is that it? Well, it's certainly carrying more information for the very reason you just said. Because if you look at what exists physically as I'm speaking, then it's the air moving or the electrics recording digital information. There's no meaning in any of it. The meaning exists in the psyche. So what's happened is the evolution has gone on to a new level. It's evolved from matter to life.
The most emergent
And
aspect.
then this most emergent aspect is the psyche, in which there is now meaning. Now, if you reduce that, you lose all the meaning. And then you go, the universe is meaningless. But it's not meaningless.
And you're incorporating the idea that it is that and it's this, isn't it? It's both. It's the idea that if you imagine if we go into the state of the most basic millions of years ago when there was just a sense of being, or there was a sense of beingness. And if we look at this emergent universe, as you look at the process that it seems to be displaying for evolution, what the universe is that it's moving from a state of being to a state of being conscious of the feeling or the sensation of being. It's emerging.
We've seen 10 billion years of just developing the physical universe and then these 4 billion years of developing life. And once you hit life, you start to see the emergence of consciousness, in which it's conscious of being. So it doesn't just exist, but it's conscious of existing. And the first place you see that is bodily consciousness. I'm conscious of being a body. We still have that. Then the next level is going to be, I'm conscious of being a psyche. And then the psyche is huge, actually. It's evolving so quickly. It's many, many leveled. And if you explore that with meditation or psychedelics or philosophy, creativity, anything, dreams, It's a whole domain of reality.
Yeah.
Is this one of the problems? Because for me, layman's term is science tries to measure something, doesn't it? And that's an invisible sort of matter, isn't it? Imagination and this consciousness that we're talking about. Is that one of the problems?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So the scientific method, which is amazing, make no mistake about it, in my view, is incredibly good at measuring things that repeat. My own guess, my own philosophy is that this how can I do this? Let me say something about time a second.
Yeah.
It's getting a bit philosophical, but let me say it. Look, when I sit here in this moment, what I'm experiencing is this flow of time. Everything's changing all the time. But it has a particular nature, which is interesting, which is every new moment I've ever experienced, and I'm guessing the same for you, is new. So it's constantly realizing new potential. But every new moment also contains within it explicitly everything that's ever happened before. And that's what people miss, because we get this idea that the past passes, but it doesn't, because it's implicit in the present. Because if it wasn't for the moment before, there would not be this moment. And that goes back and back and back. And so implicit in this moment is you contacting me and saying, would I like to be on your podcast? Me saying yes, us learning English, the evolution of the human body, the evolution of the whole universe.
Yeah.
Everything's implicit in this moment. And so what's been happening for 14 billion years is that more and more information has been accumulating, and that is forming how the universe works. So that's what I think is been fundamentally happening. And that's true on every level. That's true on the physical level, it's true on the biological level, and it's true on the psychic level of the psyche. So everything is repeating these patterns, which is getting to them.
And what is this, Tim? I mean, it's the most difficult thing in the world to try and really grasp. We can look at the process and build a model in a sense. But in terms of really understanding, as you speak about when you talk about being deep awake, when you really become conscious of this present moment and how miraculous it is, and what is the ultimate goal of this process in this emergence that you're speaking about?
Yeah, well, this is the most important thing, really, is the understanding of it is there to support exactly what you're saying. See, so for when I said earlier, look, I want to integrate science and spirituality. Why? Well, there's lots of stuff in spirituality that's of value, but the most important thing is this idea that it's possible to have what traditionally is called an awakening. And that's really what I've been exploring experientially since I was very young. And I call it now, just as you said, being called deep awake. So what's happening there, I think, is that, when we to tie it back in with where we were just a minute ago, saying about time is accumulating. And so there's a thing which I call passivity, which is things repeats the past, repeats the past. And that's taking us through, and then we're reaching this place where we're conscious of being the body, we're conscious of being the psyche now, and then the new thing on the block, which has been happening actually for quite some hundreds and hundreds of years, but only to very few people, and happening now to more people, is another jump, and it's a big jump, when you suddenly realize, I'm not just the body, I'm not just my psyche, and this can sound a bit strange at first, but I'm the universe.
Yeah.
I'm the whole universe. What else could I be, actually? Well, there's the universe and Tim? Is that what exists? Yeah. No. Tim is an expression of the universe.
And are you talking about that in the awakening, or every second of the day? You are always this.
You are always the universe.
Always this.
And then it's a matter of whether you see that or not.
I like the idea of Tim of when I look at some of the previous philosophies, like Ramana Maharshi, for instance, was losing the identity to find this enlightenment. And what I hear, and I may be hearing it wrong, but what I hear through your philosophy is the idea that you can keep your individuality and find the same place.
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah.
More, not just you can keep it, but I think that understanding that Ramana puts across beautifully is wrong, but understandable. It's a traditional view, and I think it's because when you experience an awakening, and I've been lucky enough to explore that a lot, your attention goes to the oneness. And certainly if you go within, and it's just everything dissolves into being, into oneness, you can, and then when you come back, it can be like, what pulled me back? Well, Tim did, so get rid of Tim.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's the complete opposite. I think the individual is what becomes conscious of the oneness. So that the individual is not the problem, it's the foundation. So this 14 billion years of evolution, which the earlier ancient sages knew nothing of, has prepared us now that we are conscious of the body, we're conscious of the psyche, that's still increasing, we're still evolving, but now we can be conscious of being. And you said earlier, look, there's a ground of being. There's one quality that everything has, and it's kind of an obvious one. Everything is being. And that being is in a process of becoming everything. That's the evolutionary process. What's happening now through us is that we can be conscious that we are the oneness of being. And that's a big jump. And it's from what I call an individual to a unividual, an individual conscious of unity.
Can I just ask Tim if you can explain this? Some people might not know about this awakening.
Yeah.
They might not have experienced it.
Sure.
For me, I'm a little bit confused. Is an awakening the same as an ego death? Would you say it's a similar experience?
I think they are equated, but I think an ego death is a bad thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that, I mean, I know I'm speaking against the ancient traditions here, but then I want to create a trans-scientific spirituality. We need to move it on.
Yeah.
And the old idea, like I didn't really complete the idea, but I said, look, science needs to realize there's another domain it's ignoring, which is the whole domain of the psyche or the soul, which has evolved. Spirituality needs to understand it's evolved. It hasn't been there forever and we've fallen from it. Yeah. It's evolved. Now, if you think you've fallen from it, then everything that makes you a human being is a problem. The body is a problem. Sex is a problem. Pleasure is a problem. Attachments are a problem. Thinking is a problem. Your ego, your sense of being identity. Those are the things which keep you trapped in the illusion. Get rid of that idea and stop seeing life as a problem. But instead, it's an evolutionary process which can take us to deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper
realizations. And in a sense, we never chose our personality. It was there, and one could argue that if it's there, it's meant to be there. It's something that's meant to be harnessed and integrated and accepted within the self, isn't it?
I certainly don't think that the universe is so perverse that we've had all of this 14 billion years of evolution leading to us three, right now. And I mean this literally, guys. The universe is talking about itself. Yeah. That's where it's gone. Yeah. It's gone from being basically hydrogen and a bit of helium to sitting here talking about itself. Now, I don't think that's some big mistake. No. I think that's incredible. But through that, it's all to do with how you understand consciousness.
Yeah.
So I suggest that if you look at your actual experience right now, consciousness is paying attention. Where you pay attention, you are conscious.
Yeah.
So I'm paying attention to you now. I wasn't conscious of my wife, Debbie, who made us coffee earlier. But now I'm thinking about her. I'm conscious of her. But then she was unconscious. I wasn't conscious about my feet. Now I've mentioned my feet. I bet you weren't conscious of your feet, but you probably are now.
Yeah.
So consciousness is paying attention, and all the rest goes into unconsciousness.
I like this idea, Tim. Sorry to interrupt you, but speaking of consciousness, the idea of the 50 trillion cells in the body, and they all have a sense of being.
Yeah.
They may have a sense of awareness that we could describe as a very fractional aspect of consciousness, but they are so unconscious, they have no idea that they're in a body that can write poetry, feel love.
Isn't that lovely?
And if we can take that model and realise that we are so just as unconscious, that we're a part of something so grand and even can access more beauty than we can perceive.
Exactly right. I just had this image. There's one cell in my finger was just going, I know. Oh, that's a awakened cell. Yeah, exactly. So what you're talking about there is the idea of the unividual. Now, this is a spiritual idea, very important. People have been exploring it for centuries. I think we take it seriously. We just need to understand it in a new way. And that is, look, when you unividuate, when you start to make the shift, the ego doesn't die, it doesn't need to, it's not a problem. It's the foundation. In fact, the healthier the psyche, the more easy it is to sustain these higher levels. So, we want people to be healthy bodies. We want people to be healthy psyches. We're all on a journey with that. It's an evolutionary process. It's not easy. But these things can help us then experience these sublime states. And what marks them out with the oneness is this incredible love, or this feeling of universal benevolence.
And this is important because we do this podcast for mental health sufferers, really, people who suffer. And if they can see a positive side more than a negative side, it can lift them out of their mental health condition. Can you explain why it is love?
Yeah. So the reason I want to just pick up a thought we just left behind, and then I want to move to love. Because I don't want to just leave it hanging.
Okay.
When I was talking about consciousness as paying attention, the reason I wanted to do that was because when you pay attention to one thing, like I said, your feet, you lose consciousness of other things.
Yes.
That's what's happening with the ego. When you go deeply into the oneness, you will lose consciousness of the ego, but it's still there.
Yes.
You're just not conscious of it.
Yeah.
That's the key difference. It's not you've got to destroy it or it's in the way. It's just that you learn the ability to be able to place your attention somewhere else.
This is beautiful for me, Tim. This is lovely to hear, and it's so refreshing. I mean, for me, myself, I've been lost in the past 12 months in terms of having some sort of an existential crisis of not knowing, seeing in the outside world no meaning, and then believing that my life was meaningless as a result of seeing no meaning in the world. But listening to this philosophy and how it is so incorporated with science, and it's based, and it sees a process of evolution. It incorporates that we are on a journey. We're part of a process. We're meant to be here, and we're meant to be experiencing it through the individual self. It's not something to be discarded and thrown away. Is so liberating for me.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then what happens is that there's various ways you can do that. You can become, it doesn't happen that much, but you can take your attention and become completely engulfed in something which is transcending the self altogether. And you lose all consciousness of the self. It's really quite a beautiful place. But more likely, and as well, you can be in a both and place where you have the sense of oneness, but you're also, I'm Tim, I'm just hanging out with you. And yet also this oneness is here. Now, you asked the big question. Why is that love, or benevolence, I also called it, this wishing well to things? I think it's because love is how oneness feels. I think that's the simplest way to get it. It's like when I think of my kids or anyone I love, there's a profound sense of connection, which underlies the separateness. We're separate, but we're not just separate. We're individual, but we're also one. There's a communion, and that's what the feeling of love is. Now, everyone experiences that, I hope anyway, to people around them, or their family, their friends. What happens when you realize you're one with everyone? Suddenly, there's this unconditional, all-embracing love or compassion or benevolence. You don't just wish well for yourself and your friends and your family, you wish well for everybody. And there's a profound connectedness, and not just people. I mean, the universe, the natural world.
I felt that, Tim, and I want to stay there. Have you got any tips on how to stay in that lovely place?
These are the really good questions, aren't they? Look, you certainly can't hang on to it.
No.
But and I think one of the biggest things is to get rid of the idea in spirituality that you should be in it always. I mean, obviously it's nice, so you want to, but because there's we imported a lot of Eastern ideas, some of which were very good, some of which were not, over the last 50 years particularly. And one of them is this idea of enlightenment, which I think is a very bad idea now, which is you can reach a place where you're in this perfect state, you've lost your ego, and you've arrived. And you're done. It's like you've arrived. You've seen through the illusion, and if you're not in that, it's some sort of failure. Whereas I don't think that's right at all. I think we're evolving, and that means the process of evolving is constantly realizing you're wrong, making mistakes.
It's going to be messy, isn't it?
It's messy, man. It is messy, and it involves suffering, and and sometimes the worst times turn into the best times. And like you said, when you feel very lost, the number of people that I meet who are exploring deep aspects of life that had that initiated by a time when they were really, really struggling. It was immense. It didn't happen for me that way, but I would say the majority of people get catapulted into a really genuine spiritual life by some sort of psychological catastrophe.
Yeah.
So, Tim, another very easy question for you to answer. What happens when the body dies?
Well,
I'm not making it easy for you, Tim, am I?
my own hunch, I've been around death a lot, personally and professionally as well. I think what I can do to begin with is I can definitely phrase the question in a way that I find interesting. So we said earlier, look, everyone is experiencing the body and the soul all the time. It's nothing mysterious. You're experiencing it right now. There's a material reality and there's a transmaterial or non-material reality, and you're in it all the time. And you go deep into it, say in a dream, where you're just completely in it. Yeah. So I think the question about death is this: when the body dies and the sensory world stops, does the world of the imagination stop or not? And obviously for the reductionists, it stops because it's only a byproduct. But if it's a domain in its own right, then we should not assume that because the body dies, the experience you're having right now of the imaginal does end. And what intrigues me about, well, the hundreds of thousands of near-death experience reports we now have is they all create a picture that what happens when the body dies is that the imagination comes to life and that there's a kind of collective dream state in which you can enter, where this process of evolving, of individuating, of becoming ourselves carries on.
And they describe that place as it felt more real than this.
Yeah, and I think that's always a sign of the more emergent.
Yes.
The more emergent feels more real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all real. It's all real. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not saying anything's more real than anything else. It's all real. But that profound experience you can have in the deep spiritual experiences of the imaginal, they do. I concur with that. That's my experience also.
So as we move Unividualism forwards, what's the hindsight of the future, Tim? What would you love the outcome to be?
Well, I think we've been through this intense period of individualism, and I think the next phase is going to be Unividualism, and I think it's just beginning. But things move fast these days, so I have no idea. I mean, I'm not, who knows how fast or slow it will be. I haven't got a clue, not a clue. But what I'd like to see is a shift. I'd like to see a paradigm shift in our understanding, which brings spirituality back in, not as some fruity woo-woo thing on the edges, but something which you can hold up to intellectual rigor, which we take seriously, which is in the mainstream of human culture. But more importantly, I'd like to see more and more people get it. I'd like us. I don't know how many it takes. It doesn't take a majority. The new world is always created by small groups, but it takes enough people to wake up and go, oh, I am this individual, but also I have a universal identity. I'm the whole thing. And to really get that experientially and then start living from it. And if we do that, and it'll bring such a degree of goodwill, of benevolence and love into the world, it will utterly transform everything.
Well, I'm there with you, Tim. I want that as well. What about you, Craig?
Well, I've got a bit of a question back on the love one again.
Yeah.
You know how you say the ego's still there? It's just maybe you've forgotten about it.
Of it.
Like you've forgotten about God consciousness.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that feeling of love be manipulated by the ego?
Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to tell what the hell do we mean by ego? Because people mean different things. In spirituality, generally, I think it just means the individual. I mean, the ego just means the I. It's Latin. It's just the I.
Yeah.
So if you mean that, it's still there. What I'm not saying is about egotism. So if you look for someone who really just thinks about themselves, that's a problem for them and everyone around them. So egotism, just being me, is not a very good way to live, and it's a terrible way to live with others. But the idea that you exist as you and I'm Tim and we're individuals, that's the thing which can seem to dissolve sometime but will come back and actually the individual becomes empowered by the love. And it's the individual who will act in a loving way. Everything goes through the individual, of There's nothing
Yeah.
else for it to do.
So me doing something for you now, if I gave you a gift that
Yep.
made me feel better,
Yeah.
is this obviously doing the kindness is better than not doing the kindness? But is this still a selfish act by me, just for me?
Well, yes, in a way, and that's a good thing,
And that's okay.
isn't it? Isn't that great? Isn't it great that being loving feels so good? Isn't it great that when you're kind, it kind of lifts you up?
Absolutely. Yeah.
These are great things, because the only problem is if you're not really doing a kindness, you're manipulating me. You're looking like you're doing a kindness, but really you're not doing that. You're just manipulating me for your own benefit. That's egotism. These are pathological states, which some people get stuck in for a while.
And it divides us even more, and we're looking for that unity and that oneness, aren't we? And love, and trying to understand people, to be able to love people more by being aware that we are all that, from that place of being, that oneness. It unites us as a family rather than feeling that separation and divide from one another, doesn't it?
Beautiful. Exactly. So I really get what you're trying to say, I think, but my feeling is, look, the universe is so set up that when you enter these states, when you know that when you give, you get the most you could possibly receive. And that's wonderful.
So this we've experienced probably awakenings. I think I have, and probably more ego deaths, which still, like you said, some people do this through pain and suffering. Seems to be, the majority. Some people are completely unconscious to this experience, which we know if everyone evolves to, we'd probably look after the planet first of all a lot better than we are doing.
Yep.
We'd love each other, our neighbours. We wouldn't just, at the moment it's kind of family and friends, isn't it? We could do it to complete strangers. So we know this is a good feeling to experience, and then bring it back with the ego if that's the experience. So how do you transcend that first bit? How do you get to is it through an awakening that you learn about consciousness to then bring it back and be this loving person?
Well, we're doing it all the time. The evolutionary process, existence is, I would say, the evolutionary process. So it's always happening. But there's moments. And those moments can be dramatic. They can feel, like you said, they can feel like an ego death. I don't like the phrase myself, although it's popular, because I don't want to set up in anyone's mind that they have to go through some sort of awful thing in order to arrive at where they need to arrive at. They don't. They really don't. But if you have gone through some awful thing, you can find within it something really valuable. So that's a different thing. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It brings meaning to the suffering, but doesn't require the suffering.
See, I see a lot of the new sort of psychology that I'm seeing on social media say that it is through this experience of going through something bad.
Yeah.
You have to suffer to see how much you're in pain.
But maybe that's because people are unconscious in a sense. So they're suffering because of that lack of consciousness.
So is it the knowledge or the experience? So is it the awakening that creates...
The awakening can just happen. That's what happened for me.
Can you learn the knowledge of consciousness and this feeling of love without the experience of it?
Without the experience of
the awakening.
Of awakening?
Of feeling it.
Oh, I think they are the same thing.
Yeah.
The what gets called the awakening is the experience. So, if that's how you know. I mean, you can have it as a theory, but you won't know it. It's a bit like having a theory that you could fall in love, but you've never fallen in love.
Yeah.
When you do, it fills every cell in your body. And this is the same. So it's definitely experiential. And I think there is something profound to seeing that when we go through periods of immense suffering, that hidden inside them is, the gold, the alchemist's gold. You can transmute wounds into wisdom.
Yeah.
That's a key understanding. But don't go out looking for suffering. You don't have to have suffering.
Yeah.
And you can also just stumble across the gold along the way. It's not only in suffering.
You can have this experience just walking.
It's everywhere.
Nature,
it's
it doesn't
everywhere.
have to be through suffering.
Yeah, and so we don't want to create that idea that somehow this is some sort of breakdown, the psyche has to break down. In fact, generally it's the opposite. The psyche needs to become strong, robust, and healthy It's just that if there's something which needs adjusting, sometimes it will break down first to reform in a better way.
Okay, so, I'm thinking from the perspective of someone suffering now who can't see any other reality.
Yeah.
Would you say that you at least have to believe in this place existing?
No, you don't have to believe in it. I've had times in my life where I've lost that and it's come and got me. I know plenty of people who've been surprised by joy, as C.S. Lewis called it, when he was in a very, very dark place and had his awakening after the death of his wife. And yeah, Surprised by Joy was the book because he was surprised. Yeah. So it can just happen. But obviously, if you're open to it and if you start exploring it, there's more opportunity for it to come and find you.
Yeah.
So, Tim, we're drawing close to the end of the podcast now. Could you give people some details of how they can get in contact with what it is that you do?
Yeah, so the best place is to Google my name because it's such an odd one, Tim Freke, but you have to spell it Freke, and then you'll reach my website, my YouTube channel, my Facebook page. And the other thing which I'm really excited by, especially in these times of COVID, is I've started to get together people once a week online, and it's literally all over the world. I call it the international community of Unividuals, and it's not a pay for subscription site or anything like that. It is actually what it says. It is a community of Unividuals. So it's people who've had the same response you just had when you go, I want that.
Yeah,
That's lovely. Both of you just like, yeah, that's right. And that's the reason I think we're unividuating is because I'm meeting not everyone, but more and more people who, and you can see in the tone or hear in the tone of voice that this is real. People mean this. So for me, it's like, well, let's gather together, and those people that want to explore the philosophy that I'm articulating and also the practices, because there's things we can do, and that addresses also the people who may be suffering. It's like, well, the meditation is really just using your consciousness, your focus. Consciousness is paying attention, so you can learn to pay attention in a different way, which can help facilitate this awakening. And I explore that. So you can check out the ICU, the International Community of Unividuals, and we meet up once a week and discuss interesting ideas and do interesting stuff together, practices.
That's lovely, Tim. Thank you very much for inviting us into your home.
It's been a real joy to talk to you about.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Thank you, Tim.